Everyone at Meridian Strategies knew three things about Victoria Hale. First, she was the youngest managing director in the firm's 40-year history, appointed at 36 after turning a failing West Coast division into the company's highest-grossing branch in under 2 years. Second, she had never, in 7 years at Meridian, raised her voice in a meeting, lost a client, or made a decision she later regretted. And third, she did not date colleagues, not because the company policy prohibited it, but because Victoria Hale did not mix the two things she valued most, her work and her peace. She had watched too many brilliant women set fire to their own careers over men who were not worth the smoke. She had decided quietly and permanently that she would not be one of them. She had excellent control over boardrooms, over quarterly projections, over the carefully maintained distance between herself and every person who worked beneath her, until Daniel Reeves walked into her office on a Monday morning in September with a data analysis that was so thorough, so precisely argued, so unexpectedly brilliant, that she had looked up from the report and stared at him for a full 3 seconds before she could compose her face back into its professional neutrality. That was the first crack. Daniel was 32, a senior analyst who had transferred from the Chicago office 8 months prior. He was not the loudest person in any room. In fact, he was often the quietest, which in a firm full of people who confused volume with intelligence made him stand out in the opposite direction. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of focused brown eyes that gave the impression he was always thinking one layer deeper than the conversation currently happening. He worked harder than anyone on Victoria's team, stayed later than everyone except her, and had the specific professional quality she respected above all others. He never wasted her time. Every email was precise. Every presentation was ready before she asked for it. Every problem he brought to her already had 3 potential solutions attached. He was also, and this was the part Victoria refused to examine directly, quietly, consistently, devastatingly attractive. Not in a way that announced itself, in a way that crept up on you during a Tuesday afternoon meeting when he was walking through a risk assessment, and you suddenly became aware that you had stopped listening to the words and started listening to the voice. She had noticed this about herself exactly once, dismissed it immediately, and filed it under irrelevant. For 8 months, they worked together with the kind of precise, productive professionalism that Victoria had built her reputation on. She gave him the most complex accounts. He delivered without fail. She pushed back on his analyses when she disagreed. He pushed back on hers when he had reason to, which was the thing that made her trust him completely. He was not afraid of her, which meant his agreement actually meant something. The rest of the office noticed what neither of them would say out loud. The way Daniel always brought 2 coffees to early morning briefings without being asked, because he had learned in week 2 that Victoria arrived before the building cafe opened. The way Victoria gave Daniel more direct feedback than anyone else on the team, harder, more detailed, more honest, which anyone who understood her knew was not criticism but investment. The way they moved around each other in the office kitchen with a careful, practiced distance, like 2 people who were very aware of exactly how much space the other one was taking up. Her assistant, a sharp 26-year-old named Priya, had said to her colleague once, in what she believed was a private moment, either they're both completely oblivious, or they're the 2 most disciplined people alive. The colleague had responded, with Victoria Hale, it's always the second one. She was right. It was always the second one. Until October. The Henderson account had been Victoria's most important client relationship for 3 years, a mid-size pharmaceutical firm whose contract represented 12% of Meridian's annual revenue. In the second week of October, Henderson's board made an unexpected internal decision that restructured their entire financial strategy, rendering 6 months of work by Victoria's team effectively obsolete overnight. She had 48 hours to rebuild the pitch, reframe the strategy, and present to their board before they took the meeting to a competing firm. She kept the team until 9 the first night. She kept them until 11 the second. By the morning of the presentation, she had slept 4 hours across 2 days. Her office looked like the aftermath of a productive natural disaster, and she was running on black coffee and the specific kind of controlled fury that had always been her most productive state. Daniel had stayed both nights without being asked, not hovering, working, genuinely, at his desk outside her office, rebuilding projection models while she restructured the narrative. At 2 in the morning on the second night, he had knocked on her open office door and set a container of food on her desk without a word. Takeout from the Thai place 3 blocks away that he had apparently gone to get himself, because the building kitchen had nothing left. She had looked at the food, then at him. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said, and went back to his desk. She ate it. She did not examine the feeling that accompanied that decision. The Henderson presentation was, by every measure, a success. The board not only retained Meridian, but expanded the contract scope. Victoria's team celebrated in the conference room with champagne at 4 in the afternoon and the specific, exhausted joy of people who had done something very hard and come out the other side intact. Victoria smiled, said the right things, thanked her team genuinely. And then she went back to her office and sat at her desk in the quiet, after everyone had gone, and felt the adrenaline that had been holding her upright for 48 hours leave her body all at once. She was tired, not work tired, the deeper kind, the kind that had nothing to do with the Henderson account and everything to do with the 4 months she had spent being rigorously, exhaustingly, professionally unaware of Daniel Reeves. He appeared in her doorway at 6:15. He had his jacket on. He was leaving. "Good work today," he said, standard, professional. "Daniel," she said. He stopped. She looked at him from behind her desk. She had meant to say something measured, something appropriate, something that fit inside the careful, controlled framework she had spent years constructing. Instead, she said, "How do you do it?" He tilted his head slightly. "Do what?" "Stay," she said. 2 nights, 4 months. Every time I push, you don't move. Every time I ask for more, you just deliver." She shook her head, and there was something raw in it. Something she hadn't intended to let out. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" And I don't mean at Meridian. The office was empty. The building was mostly quiet. The city light through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Behind her cast. Everything in a low blue gold. The specific light of a Chicago evening, when the day has taken everything from you and left you honest. He was quiet for a moment. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Not forcefully, just closed it. The small, decisive click of it was the loudest sound in the room. "You know what I'm doing here," he said. She stood up. She did not know why she stood up, but she did. And now they were both standing on the same side of the room, and the desk was between them. But it felt like a formality. "I don't do this," she said. Her voice was steady, but it cost her. "I have never done this. I built everything I have by not doing this." "I know," he said. "I've watched you not do it for 4 months. Then you know why I can't." "I know why you think you can't," he said quietly. "I also know that you stayed in this office last Tuesday until 10 p.m. on a project that didn't need you there past 7, and the Tuesday before that, and the one before that." He held her gaze. "I'm not asking you to blow up your career, Victoria. I'm not asking you to be unprofessional, or reckless, or anything that isn't completely, fully you." He paused. "I'm just asking you to tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't feel this, and I'll transfer back to Chicago on Monday. And you'll never have to think about it again." The city glowed behind her. She said nothing, because she could not tell him he was wrong. In 7 years at Meridian, Victoria Hale had delivered bad news to major clients without flinching. She had walked into boardrooms where every person at the table was older, louder, and more certain of their own importance. And she had dismantled their assumptions with data and walked out with their business. She had been passed over for a promotion she deserved, filed the appropriate challenge, won it, and returned to work the next morning without missing a beat. She had never lost control. Now, before this story reaches its end, there is something that needs to be said directly to you. Because if you have come this far, if you have stayed through every word of this, then you understand something about Victoria that she was only just understanding about herself. Control is not strength. Control is sometimes just fear wearing a very expensive suit. The bravest thing any of us ever does is not the boardroom win or the perfect presentation. It is the moment we stop performing in vulnerability for the people who have already seen through it anyway. If this story is reaching something real in you, stay until the very last second. Watch it to the end. And if these stories matter to you, like this video and subscribe to this channel. Because every week we are here telling the stories that remind you it is not weakness to be known. It is the whole point. Back to Victoria. She came around the desk. She did not plan it. She did not run a risk analysis or consider the professional implications or consult the careful internal framework she had built over 7 years. She simply closed the distance between them. And when she was close enough that she had to look up slightly to hold his eyes, she said very quietly. "You're not wrong." Daniel was still, the kind of still that meant he was absorbing something completely. Then, and this was the thing she had not expected, the thing that cracked her remaining composure. Cleanly in half, he reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with the same focused, unhurried care he brought to everything, and said, "I know." She laughed. It came out broken and real and completely, unlike the version of herself she performed for the world. And he smiled at the sound of it like it was the thing he had been waiting for. And then there was no more distance left between them and the careful, controlled, immaculate professional life of Victoria. Hale had a crack running through it that she was, for the first time, entirely uninterested in repairing. The following Monday morning she called Priya into her office and told her to look up Meridian's interdepartment relationship disclosure policy. Priya had looked at her for exactly 2 seconds before saying, completely deadpan, "I already have it pulled up. I've had it pulled up since November." Victoria had stared at her. Priya had smiled. "I'll send it to you and Mr. Reeves." The office, when the news became quietly known, reacted the way offices always react, with the particular mixture of genuine happiness and vindicated gossip of people who had seen something coming long before the people involved were willing to admit it. The colleague who had told Priya they were the 2 most disciplined people alive collected $20 from 3 separate co-workers. But here is what none of them saw. The Saturday morning 3 months later, when Victoria Hale, who ran boardrooms without blinking, who had never raised her voice or lost a client or made a decision she later regretted, was sitting on Daniel's couch with her legs across his lap and a brief in her hands and her hair down for the first time in what felt like years, and he was reading beside her with one hand resting on her ankle with the same quiet, unhurried certainty with which he did everything, and she looked up from the page and thought, with a clarity that felt like something settling permanently into place, "This is the thing I was protecting my career from." And I had it completely backwards. She had spent 7 years believing that love was the threat to everything she had built. She had not understood that the right person doesn't threaten what you've built. They sit beside you in it. They bring you coffee before the building cafe opens. They stay 2 nights without being asked. They close the door quietly and tell you that you don't have to perform in vulnerability anymore. And then they wait without pressure for you to believe them. Victoria Hale had never lost control until the night she finally understood that what she'd been calling control was just the longest, most exhausting audition of her life. And Daniel Reeves was the first person who had never asked her to perform it. She set down the brief. She looked at him. He looked back.
"What?" he said.
"Nothing," she said, and meant the opposite of nothing. And that was enough. That was finally, completely, more than enough.